Just want to say good evening and welcome to the Rare Book Room. My name is Nick, and I help direct the events here at the Strand. For a little bit of history, the Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. Under Nancy, the Strand is not only surviving in an increasingly competitive and unsure environment, but it is thriving. The Strand continues to famously hold 18 miles of used, new, and rare books, and now hosts nearly 400 events a year. In large part, this is thanks to all of you. Without our loyal community of book lovers, we wouldn't be here today, so thank you. Tonight it is my pleasure to welcome John Sayles, fiction writer, screenwriter, actor, and feature film director, to launch his new novel, Yellow Earth. He has been nominated for both a National Book Award and the National Critics Circle Award. He has written over 100 screenplays and was twice nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. He has directed 18 feature films, with another, I Passed This Way, currently in progress. His films Mate One and Lone Star, as well as his previous novel, A Moment in the Sun, are often used for instruction in history and American studies courses. Yellow Earth is his 5th and highly anticipated novel. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming John and Yellow Earth to the Strand.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming. Yellow Earth is a novel it's based on the shale oil extraction boom and bust that happened in the Bakken finding up in mostly North Dakota. A little bit of it was in Canada around 2007 to about 2012. And I got interested in it because it's a small city, 15,000 people. 6 months after the oil boom started, had 45,000 people. And most of those 30,000 people who just showed up being men without women and their camp followers. And that kind of invasion has always interested me, and how the people who already live there, you know, who are the people who come, what do they come for, what do they get, and how do people deal with this thing? Yellow Earth is the name of this small city, the name I've given to the small city, and there's also an Indian reservation right next to it. If you look at your map, it's the next major Indian reservation north of Standing Rock. So this is stuff that happened. The pipeline that they're going to and mostly have built in Standing Rock is moving the oil that they dig in Yellow Earth. The chapter section that I'm going to read you, as I usually do in my novels, this is a story told through multiple points of view, so you meet a lot of different people. And who you're going to meet in this story mostly is a guy named Brent, who has ended up being he's a white guy, he's a partner of the chairman of the tribal council on the reservation, which also has oil, and the chairman, the chief, he calls him, has decided to open the reservation's arm to the oil business with the idea that sovereignty by the barrel is the way to go, and that the money that they make from the oil will get the federal government off their back. And so whatever the oil business wants, they can have. And he also has an oil services company in partnership with this white guy, and he'll make some money on the side himself. Unfortunately, Brent is a con man and Ayn Rand fan. And this is a chapter where he thinks he has possible money bags on the line, and he's partners with Harleigh Killdeer, who is the chief of the tribal council, and he's taking this money bags guy hunting. It's not like I won the lottery, dude, says Brent. It is a fucking lottery. There's just over 400 elk licenses this year and like 12,000 guys applying. Plus, if you struck out before, your name shows up more times. The more years you signed up and whiffed, the better your chances. But you nail it on your first try. Wayne Lee drives the Camaro like he always does, like it's a fucking stock car race. Not only that, I got an any elk tag. 2/3 of the guys who scored have to whack something without antlers. There's a light rain and some wind, typical funky Dakota weather, but the forecast has it clearing up. Wayne Lee already has the orange vest over his camo outfit. So this Okie from Muskogee, he's from Drumright, west of Tulsa, and he's looking to stick a dozen wells on the res. And you want the service contract, at the least, says Brent. It's been a bitch setting this all up. Feelers out to ranchers in the E2 unit, non-resident permits for Mutt Miller, just in case they run into a game warden with a hard-on, salting the mine far enough ahead of time. He needs Wayne Lee for a buffer, make it all seem like guys just out having fun. What I want is for Mutt to go away convinced that nothing happens unless I put in the word with Chief Kildeer. So he depends on you. So he sweetens the pot a little, maybe puts me in for a percentage of 1 or 2 of the wells. He'd go for that? Hey, when I told him I got an elk tag, he was the one who hinted he'd like to be the trigger man. So not a stranger to a little larceny. More of an old-fashioned wildcatter than a corporate type. You'll like him. Mutt Miller is parked by the post office across from the Catholic Church in Grassy Butte, pretty much all there is to the town. Wayne Lee swings in and honks lightly, pausing a moment for Mutt to get back into his crystal red Caddy DTS and follow them to the ranch. Give the guy a break, Brent says to Wayne Lee. Keep it under 80. My only problem with this state, man, is not enough curves. Wayne Lee glances at the speedometer, probably for the second time in his life. That and the weather and the food and that there's nothing to do and not enough women. You ever been to Oklahoma? Arrested in Okie City in a bar fight? Maybe keep that one under your hat. They swing over and up past Medicine Hole, then hook left onto Gap Road. The rain stops, and by the time they pull off by the east gate into Jesse Gilmore's place, there's a bit of early morning sun peeking through the clouds. Mutt looks like a catalog ad, wearing bone collector camos, new bought from Shields in Bismarck, silver hair curling out from under an Oklahoma Thunder gimme cap. He looks like some actor Brent can't remember the name of, played a lot of generals. Fellas? Looks like a good day for it, Mutt. This is my buddy, Wayne Lee. The men shake hands, and Mutt pops his trunk open with a remote on his king rig. What you pack for me, Brent? Remington 700 with a loopholed variable scope, says Brent, lifting the case out of the bed of the pickup. Shoots a 30-06. So I'll be good for what distance? It's a tack driver from way out, but I wouldn't try anything past 400 yards. Tracking wounded elk is an acquired taste. Yeah, that you never acquired. Exactly. Growing up, Brent always had the Marines in the back of his mind, but his second state jail felony nixed that option before he got properly motivated to sign up. He's read the Corps training manuals, though, put himself through an equivalent to basic without the top sergeant growling in his ear, and feels like he could do pretty well anywhere you dropped him on the globe with a canteen, decent rifle, and K-bar knife. Mutt, on the other hand, brags about shooting wolves from a helicopter up in Alaska. Pull your tailgate down, Wayne Lee, the old boy says. I need to show you fellas something. Damn, says Wayne Lee. We're heading out with Jeremiah Johnson. He used an old hawk, and this here's an inline job. Mutt spreads all the loading gear out on a blanket. I'd like to do it traditional, flintlock or cap and ball, but those old grizzly hunters had too many misfires. Inline or not, we'll have to get awful close to put a bull elk on the ground with black powder, says Brent, as if getting close will be a problem. Well, that's the sport of it, says Mutt, tamping powder down the barrel with a rod. It's all about the stalking. He pushes the bullet into a sabot and rams it down, makes sure the safety is screwed out. The cap will go in at the last moment so you can carry it loaded. Mutt pulls some saran wrap over the muzzle and fastens it down with a rubber band, in case it rains again. Keep your powder dry, says Wayne Lee, who has never hunted in his life. Keep your powder dry and your nose to the wind. The idea is for Brent to carry the center fire rifle and Mutt his muzzle loader, pretending that he and Wayne are only along with Brent as spotters. They both hang binoculars over their necks while Brent unlocks the gate and pulls it open. Gentlemen, he says, let's go harvest a monster. Harvest hell. Mutt carries his knife without a sling. I'm gonna kill the son-bitch. Jesse Gilmore has provided Brent with a map of the property, 120 acres of it okayed for hunt-through. Brent has planned for a bit of hill and dale that will bring them to lunchtime before he heads straight to the spot where the animals are supposed to be hanging. He's got dinner reservations at the hotel in Yellow Earth and does enough cross-country in his workout. Rancher says we'll need to go in a ways before there's likely to be any action, so it won't be silent running yet. The game people schedule a couple informational meetings for tag winners, public invited, and he met Jesse there, bearded dude with a help I'm drowning look in his eye. The spread belongs to his parents who were in Florida for the winter, and it turns out Jesse got paranoid about flyovers while doing some prescription drugs one night and burnt down his own patch of homegrown and quite a bit of innocent ground cover while he was at it. Happy then to take product rather than cash for the whole setup. Did you try for a tag too, young man? Bud asked Wayne Lee. No, sir. Only way I'd ever get an elk is to chase one over a cliff on my dirt bike. Not very sporting. Yeah, try it sometime. There's never a good high cliff around when you need one. You work with Brent? Wayne Lee nods. Dispatch vehicles, fill in as a driver when needed. You look like you're in good shape. Rig workers make a lot more than drivers. Skating up on that platform in a 70-mile-an-hour gale with a half dozen pieces of equipment that knock your brains out swinging around. The oil man smiles. It can get a little hairy now and then. That's the fun of it. I'd done some roughnecking when I was your age and still got all your arms and legs. Been electrocuted twice, which I don't recommend. Other than that, it was an excellent learning experience. They come over a rise and see a stand of trees ahead, a creek running behind them. Jesse warned that there'd be some beef cattle wandering around, not cold enough yet for them to be all gathered at the pens, and so far a couple of rabbits and a pheasant have flushed out ahead of them. It all looks pretty much the same in every direction, flattish and yellow-brown, and Brent understands why Jesse might want to alter his consciousness on a regular basis. He said he'd been married and living in Rapid, but that had turned into a real disaster, and he needed a little porch time to get his head together. Weed smokers always have a plan. The fuzzier, the better. Brent asked the chief about hunting on his reservation, said Wayne Lee, opening his end of the pitch. But they only get 2 tags a season. Can you imagine that? All those Indians, Native Americans, whatever, and only 2 of them allowed to bag an elk? Wapiti, says Mutt, putting the accent on the first syllable. The proper name is Wapiti, from the Shawnee word for white butt. And you don't have them in Oklahoma. Oh, no, we're lousy with elk. Indians, too. No shit. I thought you just have a lot of jackrabbits like Texas. Oh, we even got a couple mountains, you look hard enough. Mutt calls up to Brent, who is playing the Pathfinder today. You asked the chief about that thing I mentioned? He said it's under consideration. A moody bunch, those Redskins, says Wayne Lee, trying to help out. But Brent plays the chief like a violin. I'm a quarter Cherokee myself. Wayne Lee stops to look Mutt over. Yeah? Which quarter? Mutt laughs. The great thing about Wayne Lee is that he seems more like a lightweight than he really is, at least when he's straight. Oh, the thing with Kildeer is he doesn't like to be pushed, says Brent. You can bring him around, but it takes some finessing. Oh, my outfit's got a whole pile of finesse sitting in the bank. Brent's turned to laugh. He's right about this guy, not afraid to push the envelope here and there. The thing about elected officials, he says, whether you're talking Washington, D.C. or the Three Nations, They always got to have deniability. So maybe it's a favor that gets done for a third party who the official owes for something else, and the chain of evidence is impossible to establish. You've been watching cop shows. Well, I've been working at the edge of oil and gas for a number of years, seeing how laws get passed, how other laws get enforced selectively. I'm sure we're going to be able to work something out, which means Mutt has talked as much business as he wants to for the day. What's the biggest thing you ever put down? Asked Wayne Lee, picking up the vibe. Oh, Brahma Bull, says Mutt. Must have gone 2,000 pounds easy. He got a disease or what? Oh, broken leg, a little rodeo at Guthrie. I was buddies with the vet, and he gave me the honors. Got a thick skull, your Brahma, so I put one through his eye. How was the rider? Mutt considers as he strolls with the muzzle loader held low. Well, we didn't have to shoot him. Mutt, it turns out, is not in terrific stalking shape, so Brent calls lunch a half hour earlier than he planned. The trick to the white hunter thing is to give the client the feel of a chase, even if the trophy is a cripple that never wanders from the same half-acre patch of terrain. He stopped several times in good downwind positions to have them glass the surroundings, started to whisper and signal instead of talking out loud. They sit on a shelf of rock on top of a middling ridge, the sun countering the nip of the ring of the wind, and eat the sandwiches Wayne Lee bought at the Super Value in Watford City. Mutt drinks 2 beers and takes his boots off. Ooh, I haven't had time to break these in, he says. Left all my usual gear back home. When I lived in Colorado, I used to break in new boots for people. Had my flyer on the info wall at REI. Mutt looks at Wayne Lee's feet. What are you? I'm an 11. But I could go a size smaller or 2 bigger, just pull on more pairs of socks. A pay worth the blisters? Yeah, not bad, considering you just go about whatever you were up to anyway. And it was easier on the nerves than my previous employment, which was pharmaceutical escort service. He means drug mule, says Brent. Yeah, I had a regular truck run going from McAllen to Monterey and back. Took on some extra cargo. He was young and stupid, Brent interjects, not wanting Wayne Lee to get bragging on their shared history. Now he's just stupid. The thing is, I was never uptight crossing the border, but making the pickup and paying off, damn. Lots of crazy pistoleros down there looking for an easy score. You ever been? Oh, got enough Mexicans back home. Seems that everywhere there used to be a Chinese restaurant, now it's Burritoville. Stuff don't agree with me like the chop suey did. Too spicy? Binds me up, all of that cheese. Well, they go a lot lighter on the cheese south of the border. I'll trust your word on that, buddy. Mutt looks all around, nothing moving but weeds in the wind. It ain't pretty, he says, but there sure is a lot of it. You should check out the Teddy Roosevelt Park while you're up here, says Brent. Got some variety to the landscape. But no hunting? Oh, there's a load of elk get shot over there, just not by hunters. The staff and a few volunteers culled a couple hundred out of the herd, a lot of them females and juveniles, just a couple weeks ago. Ecological balance or some shit like that. Park ranger shooting wapiti. Yeah, they get used to tourists so they're not people shy. You can walk right up and shoot most of them from a couple yards away. Execution style. I guess the meat goes to charities once it's been checked for the wasting disease. Probably the healthiest thing these people eat all year, says Mutt. I saw a fella at the Cenex in Tioga the other day, native guy, trade his food stamps in for Pringles and Little Debbie donut sticks. The white man killed their buffalo, says Wayne Lee, his face solemn, but at least he brought them reconstituted potato flakes. Mutt goes to take a leak then, and Brent scoots closer to strategize. Should be only 15-20 minutes from here, he says, keeping his voice low. I got no idea if this guy can shoot or he expects to take the elk out with his breath, but be ready for anything. If you see the herd with your glasses, give me the nod so I can be the first to spot it. Brent Sayles, master of the bush. That's the idea. He wants to negotiate with the game, he's got to go through me. Mutt comes back then, face a little red from the beer or the pissing, and picks up the night. "Onward, gentlemen," he announces. "I hear the call of the wild." Technically, it's against NDGF rules to provision or bait anything you're hunting, but they cut a lot of slack to private property owners. Jesse says he's been laying out elk candy for 2 weeks, and sure enough, there's a small herd in front of the gappy thicket of trees right where he made the X on the map. Brent comes to a sudden halt, claiming to have a feeling before he lays out on his belly with the field glasses to his eyes. Mutt is already putting the cap into the muzzle loader, screwing the safety to off, as if they're only seconds away from the moment of truth. "Check him out," Brent whispers, handing the binoculars over. He exchanges a look with Wayne Lee while Mutt scans the herd. "I see 3 bulls," says Mutt, louder than he probably should. "Awful nice racks on them. There's a 6x6 looks to be in charge. That's who we want to go for." Mutt brings the binoculars down. "You bring a caller?" "No, but Wayne Lee does a pretty good cow and estrus." Mutt grins. "Bugling won't do us much good when they're on their feed like that. We'll just keep low and work our way closer." Wayne Lee carries the muzzle loader, giving Mutt both hands to steady himself with, managing to get his head low while his butt remains stuck up in the air. They ease from clumps of bunch grass to a sprouting of chokecherry bushes, laying down to glass the spot and be sure the herd hasn't moved. Mutt has begun to sweat and breathe hard, and Brent wonders if his heart is okay. They're 2 football fields away when the cover gives out. Nothing a chipmunk could hide behind left between them and the browsing animals. Wayne Lee looks like he's gotten excited about the hunt. Golden eyes, big and shiny, always up for anything that feels like he shouldn't be doing it. The whispering helps. "We can try to move around to the left and risk spooking them," Brent whispers, "to get you a shot with a night. Or we can stay back here and hit him with the Remington." The muzzleloader has iron sights on it, Daniel Boone style, and Brent doubts Mutt can hit anything past 50 yards. Mutt adjusts his binoculars, takes another gander. "Oh, it looks awful far away, even for the Remington." "All hat and no cattle," as his cellmate in the Hightower unit used to say. Brent guesses that Mutt is more exhausted than nervous, that it's been a long, long while since he's had to climb up on a drilling platform. "Tell you what," he says, "you see that mess of chokecherry over there? High enough for you to get up on one knee for a good shot. We'll move over there and dig in while Wayne Lee works around to the other side of those woods, make a little noise, just a little, and see if he can goose that herd a little closer to us." "You're going to be shooting in my direction?" Wayne Lee is fearless to the point of stupidity, but this is not his world. "Find yourself a nice thick hunk of elm and stay behind it." Wayne Lee moves off first, and Brent is relieved to see he's taken the muzzle loader with him, not just to keep it from getting underfoot, but because Mutt packed enough black powder in it to resync the main, and he doesn't want to be anywhere near if it goes off. He carries the Remington, and Mutt follows him on hands and knees to the edge of the little cluster of chokecherry, growing about 4 feet high, but insubstantial enough to see through easily. "Get the feel of this baby," Brent says, making sure the safety is on and giving the Remington to Mutt. Mutt brings it up, points it at the herd, squints through the sight. "My guy's blocked by a couple of young skinheads. Oh, if Wayne Lee can flush him, he'll come clear. He's sure taller than the other sumbitches." The big bull is raking his antlers against the bark of a tree, the sound coming faintly after the sight of it, like dialogue in a dubbed kung fu movie. Mutt is breathing shallow and fast through his mouth, and Brent wonders what he's killed beside a crippled rodeo bull at point-blank range. "The Plains Indians," he says, hoping to calm the man, "would bury themselves in whatever the ground cover was and wait from sunup till sundown for the game, if that's what it took." Mutt's shoulders relax a little. Better if he shoots and misses than if he hits it where it can't kill. Days getting short this time of year. Tracking will be shit pretty soon. They must have had their cell phones on vibrate. Still in a good mood. "Tranquilizers in the elk bait," thinks Brent. "That's what we needed here." Mutt has laid the rifle carefully on the ground beside him, waiting comfortably on one knee, when there is a distant explosion and the herd scatters. They are in 10 different places, all of them out of range, if not out of sight, by the time Brent gets the field glasses up. What the fuck? Then Wayne Lee steps out of the woods and waves his hat, not in triumph. It is another huge bull, tongue out, head skewed sideways, with its antlers jammed against the bole of a tree, fur at the base of its neck column slick with blood. I was just coming in here, says Wayne Lee, his voice still a little shaky, and I'll run right into it, like it could have gored me with those prongs. You were walking with your finger on the trigger. Brent has the Remington in hand now, making sure Mutt doesn't shoot his idiot friend with it. I don't think so. Then how did it get there? Wayne Lee looks like he's trying to recreate the moment in his head. Self-defense? I shouldn't have left the safety off, says Mutt. It is a statement, not an apology. Brent tears the appropriate month and day from the tag provided with his license and fixes it to the antler with a rubber band holding the remnants of the blasted saran wrap at the tip of the muzzle loader. He thinks he can see black powder burns on the huge animal's chest. Make a note not to do any armed bank robberies with Wayne Lee Hickey. There's still pretty much light. You think those other ones went far away? Wayne Lee knows he has fucked the pooch 6 ways from Sunday and is wearing his best innocent little boy look. You know why they call it a once-in-a-lifetime license? Oh, right. It doesn't refer to the elk's lifetime, adds Mutt, who has squatted down to look at the glazed eye, tilting his head this way and that like he's searching for his reflection. What do we do now? Wayne Lee staring at the dead bull with something like awe, like he might have to bury it. Mutt and I, says Brent, standing up, are going to walk the 10 minutes to the ranch house and have a drink or 3. While you, and here he unsheathes his outdoor edge skinner and hands it to Wayne Lee, are going to stay here with the kill. Wayne Lee looks at the knife in his hand. You want me to like gut it or something? Just sit here with it. If a pack of coyotes or a bear shows up, use that to cut your own throat. I'm going to read one other little short piece. And this is on the reservation. And the main character here is a guy named Danny Two-Strike, who is the chief of the reservation police. And one of the weirdnesses of reservations in this country is they almost always have their own police force, but they usually cannot arrest anybody unless it's Indian on Indian crime. So if a non-Indian does a crime against an Indian, they have to rely, and these are very big reservations, so there might be 5 different county sheriffs around a big reservation, and they have to call the nearest one up and say, would you come in and help me out here? And if the sheriff is busy, like with this invasion of oil workers, they often say, I can't do it today. So a lot of shit goes on the reservation that shouldn't. There's another character here who's a minor character, but one of my favorites in the book. There is only a tiny bit of rabbit peeking out from underneath the stickers. Along with various political candidates and their running mates are the simple classics. Red Power, Proud to be Hidatsa, appealing Free Leonard Peltier, the new agey, the earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth. And a nice one he hasn't noticed before, my heroes have always killed cowboys. Marjorie looks for water, is leaning against her old VW, that expectant smile on her face and her eyes huge behind the thick lenses, parked just behind his patrol car when Danny steps out. She nods back toward the Fetterdon's trailer. Any clues on who stole the Arctic cat? Marjorie has jiggered some contraption that she keeps in the Rabbit, able to monitor the department's phone calls. Not until the first snowfall. Probably kids. What idiot steals a snowmobile in July? He looks at her car. What isn't stickered is pitted with rust. You're back on the road? It's been 3 months. I thought it was 6. That's for full reinstatement. I've got restricted status back, no highway or night driving. Already set my appointment at the clinic. You understand the responsibility, don't you? If it was only your own safety at stake. She has tonic-clonic seizures with no warning signs and is almost bitten through her tongue twice. I plan my routes, she says. I take my meds. What have they got you on? Carbatrol? Don't the side effects include fatigue? Marjorie's smile widens. Do I look fatigued to you? From all evidence, Marjorie doesn't sleep. When he pulls a graveyard shift, there is always a light on in her little house, and he stopped in for coffee and conspiracy theories more than once. The thing is, Chief, I've been noticing how thin you've been spread with all these new people coming in, and I thought you might want to reconsider. She was one of the few that call him Chief, though that is his department title. You mean as a patrol person? I passed the test 3 times. You passed the written test 3 times and flunked pretty much every part of the physical? When the Sioux attacked us, she says, up there with Teresa Crow's ghost for historical trivia, did the people ask if you had 20/20 vision? What's yours, 2100? With corrective lenses, and do I remember something about limited peripheral acuity? When she ran Indian country tours, Marjorie had led a bunch of people into the wrong chamber of a cave looking for pictographs, then had her flashlight batteries die. I hear things that other people don't. That's called an auditory delusion, Margie. I wouldn't brag about it, but you need help. Your support and encouragement is an inspiration to the entire department. Marjorie is addicted to America's Most Wanted and Cops. She is a constant blogger on websleuths.com and chat partner of the people still wondering who killed the Black Dahlia. And if she could see past her nose and didn't fall down in eye-rolling, bone-racking convulsions at inconvenient moments, Danny would love to have her on the force. How's your new business going? Schrecklich. And that's terrific. She runs an online catalog shipping native handicrafts off to German people who are gaga about Indians. And your mother? Hanging in there. Marjorie lives with her mother, who carries a cell phone with the ambulance service on speed dial in case Marjorie's epilepsy strikes at home. So far, she's only used it to report sightings of her son, gone missing in Vietnam 40 years ago, but she sees him on television at least once a week. Good, that's good. And really, I'm sorry there's nothing to be done about the job. Yeah, just thought I'd try. You're taking it really well. Marjorie has been known to persist, to plant herself in his office or block his path back into the patrol car. That's the Carbatrol. For me, it might as well be Prozac. So your moods, I don't have moods anymore, Chief. I am the eagle that never comes to earth, floating above it all, observing through your collective lenses. I see things, she says, see things on the reservation. Marjorie is not a snitch exactly, but she does get around, does listen to the gossip, and has a forensic slant on life. Such as, Dickie Boy Burdette isn't missing, whatever his grandmother might have told you. He just doesn't come home very often. You've seen him? All the time. He goes to school. He can't be missing if you attend class. Mystery solved. I'll tell his grandmother. Well, she'll forget. And then I see things left on the land, piles of them, puddles of them, in places where they shouldn't be. The drilling stuff is not my beat. Take that up with Ricky McAllen. He's doing EPA for the chief. Oh, the chief has got his hands full. Business problems, family problems. Danny opens the door of the patrol car to hear the radio, but it's only Patty at the mic singing. She leaves the Vox switched on sometimes. Terrific voice, says Marjorie. She's in my church choir. Danny sits into the patrol car. Marjorie is lonely and always ready to lay a recent unsolved murder on you, but tells such a good story you get caught up in it and time goes by. I really do hear things, Chief. Another offering. Danny picks up the cue. What do you hear? Noises, loud voices, banging, slaps, and weeping from the Carter place. J.C. Carter is a white guy, real piece of work, married to one of the Dozier girls who came up from Standing Rock. Put her in the hospital in Bismarck once. They're at least 2 miles down the road from you. Very loud noises. Somebody might need a talking to before he commits a capital crime. She is looking at him intensely, Marjorie, those magnified eyes signaling that this is dead serious. He drinking again? Amphetamines. That he gets from who? She might tell him if she knew, even if it was a relative, which, considering some of Marjorie's relatives, is entirely possible. She shrugs. Whole lot more of that floating around the res these days, as you know. Then he nods, shuts the door, but rolls the window down. I'll get over there and see what I can do, he says. Thanks, Marjorie. He drives toward the lake. J.C. spends a lot of time lifting cold ones at Lonnie's out in the county, but he might be home. And if not, his ride is easy to spot. A jet black Ram pickup with rocket flame detailing on the sides and the single bumper sticker, red letters over the silhouette of an automatic pistol. Just keep honking, it says. I'm reloading. So, any questions? I'll explain fracking to you if you'd like. Anybody? Yes.
Your novels, much like your films, are expansive mosaic narratives, multi-character, about places and the people who live and die and or are born there. In this day and age, do you plan to adapt something like Yellow Earth to a streaming platform that could allow for your novel to fully reach the screen?
You know, there is some, I forget the name of the company who's doing a books on tape, and somebody's going to read it. So if you want to listen to it with somebody who doesn't read nearly as well as I do, that'll be available. You know, people have asked if I want to make a movie of this, and just practically, I don't think there's any large oil company who's going to invite us to come and watch them put up a rig and drill for oil and us make them look bad. So just financially, this is not something that I'm likely to be able to make a movie about. One of the nice things about me being able to write novels, you know, which I did before I ever got in the movie business, is whenever the Screenwriters Union, the Writers Guild of America, goes on strike, I write a novel. So my last one was over 1,000 pages, which was a very long strike, and this was a shorter strike. So. Anybody else? Yes, in the front row here.
Thank you so much for the reading and for sharing this book with us. I guess I had a question about the impact of the novel on the climate crisis. I've been looking for a lot of novels, or any novels, around the climate crisis, modern novels especially, and have been reading that there are very few, in fact. And you think about maybe like Edward Abbey or John Steinbeck and the impact that those novels historically have had, leading to an appreciation of the natural world and also some reactions towards what's happening to the natural world. And so I was just wondering what your thoughts or feelings were, maybe as you were writing it or now that it's written and out there, of the possibilities for this novel towards affecting change within the climate crisis.
There's a couple other good books out there. Right away, there's a book called Heat and Light by Jennifer Haig, which is a novel set in the Pennsylvania country during the same kind of fracking, invasion, and they had actually more ecological problems than they had in the Bakken. I think one main thing is just that literature is not as central as it used to be. There are so many more things for, people's attention is so diverse now, and there are so many things to pay attention to that novels are a lot more marginal. They used to be in John Steinbeck's time. I think probably the book that had the most effect in America ecologically was Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. There are species that are alive today that wouldn't have been if she hadn't gotten that book out there, and it hadn't kind of like a snowball kept getting bigger and bigger, and people started paying attention to things. I'm afraid that things get written about the worse they get. And I think there's still a lot of people who just kind of say, well, gee, the weather's a little weird, but that's it. I don't think there's, with a lot of people, that feeling like the flood is rising here and my floor is here. Occasionally that happens, and then they want the, Army Corps of Engineers to do something about it. Which is probably too late to do anything about it if it's coming up that high. But yeah, I think it's just part of, anything that you do, whether it's a movie or a book, is part of the conversation. And what I try to do is have it be a somewhat positive part of the conversation and not just, a nothing part of the conversation.
I was curious how you researched the book and how much time you spent in that area. I actually worked on rigs in Williston for about a year, and the bumper stickers and a lot of the details definitely popped out at me. That made it seem like you'd spent a bit of time there.
Yeah, I had been, through the city that Yellow Earth is based on before this actually happened. It got a lot of press while it was happening, so a lot of my research was just going to news items that were online now, from the time I was. This is a story that I've been thinking about for a long, long time. There was a shale oil boom in Wyoming many, many years ago around Green River. Before the technology was that good, so it didn't last very long. They realized, we don't know what we're doing yet with getting, oil out of rock. And so it only lasted about a year and a half. And in that time, they made an enormous mess. Just the impact on the people who already lived there and on the environment and whatever. There were fewer rules then. One great thing is that now, if you want to know how to, field dress an elk, or skin a weasel, or make fry bread in Anashkanabe, 3 or 4 people have made actually pretty good little videos about them. And one of the things that's happened is that guys working on the rigs will come in with their phone and say, here's what I do, honey, and then they'll put it online. Or they'll there's a chapter in this book where it's a couple guys who are just blowing away prairie dogs. And there are quite a few prairie dog snuff films that you can watch, and they show you their guns, and then they put a telescope on the lens, and you can see the prairie dogs splatter. So it's interesting. There is a lot more ways to go places without having to go there than there used to be. And I prefer to get things firsthand. So a lot of the characters here, my informants are people who do those things, not people who write about people who do those things. So they're roughnecks or pole dancers or, people on the reservation or, sheriffs of counties that have these problems happen to them. And that stuff is a lot more available because people share it. One of the things that happened in the town that Yellow Earth is based on is that in this influx of people, there was not enough housing. So the big crisis there was, where do we put all these people? And so they set up these man camps, which is, this prefab housing. Some of it is literally shipping containers with little cutouts in it and a cable hookup. But there were a lot of people who just didn't find housing. And so there's a lot of trucks involved, as you know, with this, the bringing water in, bringing, product out, bringing in drill pipe, whatever. And truck drivers were making, and this is back in 2007, $120,000 a year, but they were living in the cab of their truck and sleeping in the Walmart parking lot, and it was 5 degrees below zero. So one of the things that got me interested is just how people, when there's this kind of feeding frenzy, My last novel starts in the Yukon during the gold rush in 1897, and it was the same kind of deal. It's just that money makes people a little bit crazy, and there's a lot of inflation. And the guys who are working 12-hour shifts, and they've got a lot of cash in their pockets, and they're in a town where there really isn't a whole lot to do, that becomes a huge problem for the law enforcement people. I don't know, testosterone mostly. It's just an awful lot of guys without much to do, young guys, and a lot of cash. And so one of the problems that the reservations had, because they not only had oil on the property and people drilling on it, a lot of people rented their surface land to man camps. And it was already a reservation that, because of the Dawes Amendment, was very checkerboarded. So a lot of plots of land were not owned by people who were on the tribal roll. They were owned by white people. So the incidence of drug abuse, rapes, other crimes on the res just shot up like crazy. And then partly because the character that I read about in The Hunt is based on a real guy, because his oil service company was supposed to be doing a lot of remediation, and they just didn't do it. There's a lot of when you frack, you send a lot of water down into the bowels of the earth, maybe 2 miles under. When it comes back up, it's irradiated. So you've got a lot of radioactive filters and water, and you got to do something with it. And a lot of it just got left on reservation land. And there were a couple leaks and little pipelines and things like that. So, it left kind of a mess.
So there may be no further writer's strike on the horizon, but if and when, do you have another a scenario or premise?
I've already written another novel because there was another writer's strike after this one. And so I wrote a novel. We haven't even started sending it around. This novel took about a year to get a publisher. The one before that took about 2 years. So I don't want to overload the market. So we'll send it out in a month or two. But it starts at the Battle of Culloden and ends at the Battle of Quebec. So again, not a low-budget independent movie, but a lot of fun to write. And there weren't any good YouTube videos from people then, because I don't know why.
Do you have any strategies or rituals to get yourself in a creative mindset when you sit down to write, or do the ideas just come naturally?
I'm very lucky in that I like to write. To me, it's fun. And when I don't think it's fun, I don't do it. So I'd say the one thing that I do is when I'm working on a novel, I'm very lucky in that I don't have to write it in sequence. So if I get stuck somewhere and I don't know exactly what to do, I can skip ahead to something that I do know how to write and just kind of leave that there, and I'll catch up with it at some point. And then when I get into a pretty good writing rhythm, I try not to, at 1 o'clock in the morning, finish a chapter. And because very often the next chapter is going to be from a totally different point of view, it may need its own research. And so to get up in the morning and finish something that's not done is a little easier than just starting cold on something. So it's just a momentum thing that I happen to do. But no, I'm not somebody who gets writer's block or something. There are writers who get stuck on a word, and if it's not the perfect word, they're stuck there until they think of that word. I just leave it blank. I have written whole paragraphs, and then in the margin said, better writing here, and keep going, because you're going to rewrite it, and just kind of getting the ideas out. I don't type that fast, and I don't even write by hand, because I do some by hand. So sometimes I have to actually, because I'm having a lot of ideas, write down notes for what I'm going to fill in later. And other times it's slower. And then rewriting is, mainly because, it's such a relief from being a screenwriter for hire, where you're getting notes from all kinds of people. And, at least half of them are stupid, and they will forget and give you new notes on your next draft, and they may contradict the notes they already gave you. So just getting to write, I don't take an advance for books or anything like that. So I'm just writing it to see if I like it at the end of it and want to try to get it published. I'm getting to write without somebody over my shoulder, and just see where it goes. And sometimes it goes someplace that turns out to be a dead end, and you just say, okay, that doesn't need to be in the book. Yes.
How do you relate your screenwriting to your novel writing? Because they're both fiction, but how do you see the difference? That's one question. The other thing, when you were talking just now about the book, you said you would be writing a chapter and researching as you're writing it. So do you first research to get the depth of the whole thing and then build characters from that research and then add to the research as you're writing each chapter?
Yeah, I basically I write stuff because I'm interested in it, and usually that means I'm interested enough, I know enough about it to be interested, but there's all kinds of stuff I don't know that I want to find out. And so I might have basically the arc of this book is a boom and a bust. And so it's got a structure already. My last novel, had to include a couple historical events, and sometimes I literally would have, some of my characters were in the 25th Colored Infantry, and in 1898 to 1900, and there are military puts out books of where they were every day and what they were doing every day, and so I could have like a historical little chronology, and I could plug in where I wanted to with my characters. But what I find is research it's so seductive. It seems like work, but it's just really fun. And so I limit myself to 1 week of research, and then I have to sit down and write some fiction. And then I can go back and do some more research. So sometimes, I'm writing and I say, well, I'll have to do some more research about the details of that, but I'm going to sit and write fiction for a week or two. And then I can go back and look into things, So there's a lot of blanks, It's like, okay, in 1897, the U.S. Army used a Krag rifle. What are the specs on a Krag rifle? Well, I'm moving along here, so I'm just going to say Krag rifle. And then when I get done with this chapter, I'm going to maybe spend a couple days, knowing the technology of that rifle and what the soldiers thought of it and what it looked like and how it operated and stuff like that. The other question about the difference between writing a novel and writing screenplays, it is quite, you use a lot of the same muscles, and you think about arc of story. In a movie, I know a lot of people don't watch movies this anymore, but I still tie if I'm writing a feature film, I still tie it to about a 2-hour arc of time, as if somebody's going to sit down and watch the movie from beginning to end. And so your storytelling, the rhythm of your storytelling, moves along that 2-hour arc, which is just not true of a book. Almost nobody is going to read a 1,000-page novel in even 3 days. So you realize people are going to get to stop where they want to. You don't know where it is. They could go back and say, oh, who was that character again? And what did he do? And then go forward again. So there's that difference in rhythm. I tend to, in my fiction, this may have 20 characters who get at least one section, one chapter in their point of view. And then you might see them again from somebody else's point of view. In a movie, I try to keep it down to 3 or 4 at the most. I made a movie called 8 Men Out, but you really only get to see it from the point of view of about 3 of the characters, not 8 of them. The main difference for me is that when you're writing a screenplay, you're writing a blueprint for something that's going to be, and sometimes I'm a writer for hire and it's somebody else is going to make it. And in which case I tend to write things that are really expensive, and then that's their problem. But even when I'm writing a screenplay that I hope to direct, it's just a blueprint. There's this wonderful line in a Raymond Chandler story where the character says, he gave me a drink of warm gin in a dirty glass. And from that detail, you can kind of see the office that they're in. It's seedy, and it's got that frosted glass, little pane in the door, and the swivel chair squeaks and stuff like that. So very often when you're writing a screenplay, because you're going to have a composer come on who can do things you can't do, a production manager, a costume designer, all these people with talents that you don't have, but you get to choose from the things that they bring you. They read my script, they read the biographies I read for the characters, and then they say, we think the character in this scene might wear something like this, and I say, well, what else might they wear? And I might pick one of 2 or 3 choices. So that's very different. You're going to be working with other people there. Whereas a book, you're God. If you want the sun to shine, the sun is shining, and it stays there until you say it's not shining. In my book Los Gusanos, I did the Bay of Pig invasion in like 7 pages. I didn't have to buy any tanks. I didn't have to rent boots for all the soldiers. I was able to kind of do it at the scale that I wanted to do it, and that was fine. The other main thing is that photographically, when you're making a movie, the camera lens sees everything that's in front of it. So what your process is, if I'm taking a wide shot of this audience, for instance, but I really am only interested in the person on the aisle in the 3rd row, I'm going to go to my collaborators and I'm going to say to the cinematographer, can we have the light fall off on the sides a little bit? To the costumer, I might say, I don't want anybody else wearing any red, but I'm going to get her a red scarf. Again, to the focus puller or the cinematographer, just with optics, can we have the first 2 rows out of focus and then have the rows beyond the 3rd one fall off a little, have a very narrow depth of field, so who I want you to look at least in that first wide shot thing, she'll be in focus and a lot of other people won't be. So we'll get the idea of a crowd, but we won't be looking at all the faces to see if there's anybody we know or anybody else famous in it. Is George Clooney there? Is he in this movie? So a lot of what you're doing is subtracting things. What don't you want to see? Oh, that's an ugly lamp. Get it out of there. Whereas in a book, you start with a blank page. Nothing's there. If I want a crowd, I gotta put them there. And if I want you to know what kind of crowd, I've got to describe them. There was an old essay about does a character need a nose? And it talks about how, Dickens always described his characters' faces. And from their physiognomy and the way he described them, you knew something about the character already. Well, most writers don't do that anymore. Now, we assume the character has a nose, even if it's never mentioned. But, I have to put it there, and the methods of making it stand out, the concrete, even with dialogue, the concrete poetry of how you arrange it on a page, makes a difference to the rhythm of how people read it. So those are very, very different ways that you control rhythm, and you move the eye, with a camera or with camera movement or with what the character is wearing or, if they're in focus or not, than in a book where everything has to go through your head. And that's the very final thing, which is a lot of our reaction to a good movie is not just intellectual, it's visceral. And there's very little you can do viscerally with a book. It has to go through your head first. There's not background music playing that just gets you, or sound effects, or, creepy music underneath, or that, that kind of stuff. And so, they are very, very different, but you're still trying to affect an audience and get them involved in the story.
Thank you so much for coming to do this with us tonight. John, can we give him a round of applause, everyone?
And if anybody wants a book signed, it could be one of mine, or you could buy one of these, and I'll sign it.
As you mentioned, we do have more copies of Yellow Earth available at the register. You can go visit Galen and she'll help you buy one. In the meantime, we might have some difficulty, but if you have a book you'd like to get signed immediately, you have one, go ahead and line up along